The soft clinking of silverware and murmurs of polite conversation filled the candlelit restaurant. Crystal glasses gleamed under warm chandelier light. A waiter leaned in to refill water as Danielle stood, holding her champagne flute with a slightly trembling hand. She looked radiant in a deep emerald dress, her hair neatly pinned back, her expression a careful mix of nervous joy and quiet pride. Around the long table sat a dozen family and friends, colleagues, church members, Marcus's business partners, and of course, his mother Grace, perched like royalty at the center. Danielle smiled and took a breath. "I just want to say," she began, voice soft but sincere, "these 7 years haven't been easy, but they've been real. We've built something together, Marcus. A life, a home. I'm proud of us, even through the storms, and I thank God every day for you." She raised her glass toward Marcus, who sat at the opposite end. A few people clapped. Tasha, Danielle's best friend, beamed supportively. Even a few of Marcus's colleagues nodded, impressed by her poise. Marcus, dressed in a sharp navy suit, leaned back in his chair with a faint, unreadable smile. He stood slowly, swirling the wine in his glass. Everyone looked at him, expecting a response, something warm, or at least gracious. But then came the chill. He gave a light laugh and cleared his throat. "Well, I guess I should say something too." Danielle smiled, waiting. He looked straight at her. "Honestly, marrying you was a mistake I kept trying to justify." There was a silence so thick it blanketed the entire table. Forks paused mid-air. Wine glasses hovered, untouched. A nervous cough came from someone near the end of the table. Danielle's smile froze. Grace raised her glass calmly and sipped, unaffected. Marcus continued, as if reading from a script only he could see. "I mean, we were young. It was emotional, impulsive even. But sometimes you make decisions out of hope, not logic, and then you live with them." He sipped his wine, unbothered, scanning the room as if expecting applause for his honesty. Danielle sat back down slowly. Her face didn't crumble. She didn't argue, didn't cry, not here, but something in her eyes dimmed. She stared at the table, then at her untouched plate, as if trying to anchor herself in something solid. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't need to, because something in her had already begun to shift. And for the first time in a long while, Danielle realized she was done shrinking to fit beside a man who only ever saw her as a burden. The applause never came, only silence. And that silence said everything. It hadn't always been like this. Danielle once stood at the edge of a brilliant career. Fresh out of graduate school, she had been offered a position at one of Atlanta's top architectural firms. Her designs were bold, modern, full of energy, much like the woman herself back then. She had ambition, a vision board, mentors lining up to guide her. The world was open. And then came Marcus, charming, passionate, ambitious in his own way. He had big dreams of launching a tech company, one of those ideas everyone said could become the next big thing, if only he had the time, space, and someone to believe in him. Danielle believed in him. When Marcus proposed, she didn't hesitate. When he said he couldn't afford an apartment and also fund the business, she offered her savings. When he said he needed someone to help manage the household, handle the bills, give him space to focus, she stepped back from her job offer and said, "I've got us." What was supposed to be a temporary pause became permanent. 1 year turned into 2, then 5, then 7. She handled the cooking, the laundry, the rent. She scheduled his meetings, reviewed proposals, answered emails in his name. Marcus never called her his business partner, only ever, "my wife who helps out." And with time, even that tone shifted. "You wouldn't understand," he'd mutter when she asked about a pitch meeting. "I'll handle it, babe. You just focus on the house. You wouldn't have your little comforts if it weren't for my hustle." Danielle swallowed every slight. Grace, Marcus's mother, never liked her. "That girl's not polished," she'd told her church circle. "Not the kind of woman I pictured next to my son." She never said it directly to Danielle's face, but it seeped in, through sideways glances, backhanded compliments, and pointed silences. Grace visited often now, especially since Marcus's business had found moderate success. She walked through the house Danielle kept spotless, inspecting it like a property she might want to sell. She'd rearrange throw pillows, frown at Danielle's cooking, and say things like, "When Marcus marries up next time, he'll know better." Marcus never corrected. The house itself had grown cold, modern, sterile, expensive looking, but Danielle's touch had slowly been erased. No more artwork she liked on the walls, No more books in the living room. She was disappearing in plain sight. At dinners, at networking events, even at church. People no longer asked Danielle what she did. They asked how Marcus's company was going. They'd glance at her and say, "So what do you do, Danielle?" Before she could answer, Marcus would laugh. "She keeps me alive, man," as if that was her grand achievement. Only Tasha saw the cracks. "Girl, I barely recognize you anymore," Tasha said one afternoon, both of them sipping tea on Danielle's porch. "You used to walk like you owned the earth. Now you whisper in your own house." Danielle forced a smile. "It's just a season. Number, it's a pattern," Tasha said sharply. "And if you're not careful, you'll blink and realize you've been written out of your own story." Danielle wanted to defend him. She always did. She wanted to believe it was just stress or temporary distance. But the truth sat heavy in her chest. She was lonely in a house full of noise. She was tired in a life she built for someone else. That night, while folding laundry in their shared bedroom, Marcus walked in and tossed his blazer on the bed. "You didn't pick up my dry cleaning," he said, scrolling through his phone. Danielle paused. "You didn't tell me you needed it. I shouldn't have to tell you. Just stay on top of things." He left the room before she could answer. Danielle sat on the edge of the bed, blazer still untouched beside her, and stared at the door long after it closed. In the silence, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, "I used to matter." She didn't cry. She just folded his blazer, placed it on the chair, and stood up straight. But deep inside, something was beginning to stir. Something old. Something she hadn't felt in years. And it wasn't love. It was the quiet memory of who she used to be. It was supposed to be a simple Saturday afternoon. Danielle had been dusting Marcus's office, a glass-walled modern space he'd declared off limits years ago unless she was bringing in food or drinks. But today, with him out at yet another investor meeting, she decided to organize the mess of papers, empty coffee cups, and tangled cords that littered the desk. She was reaching for a folder that had fallen behind the cabinet when she noticed a manila envelope, sealed but unmarked. Curious, she slid it open and froze. Inside were printed emails, dozens, some short, some long, all intimate. They weren't addressed to her. She scanned the headers. To Marcus, Dean at deantech.com, from Clarice Mitchell at paceadvisors.co. Subject, last night was electric. Danielle's heart pounded. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. Lines blurred, but a few phrases cut through. You make me feel like a woman again. She doesn't understand you the way I do. Can't wait until our next weekend in Charleston. Tucked beneath the emails were hotel receipts. The Highmark, the Candler, even one from a luxury resort in Puerto Rico. All dated over the past 18 months. Danielle felt her throat go dry. She wanted to scream, to hurl the whole drawer across the room, to collapse on the floor and sob. But something stronger held her upright, something colder. She reached for her phone, opened the camera, and began taking photos. Every email, every receipt, every timestamp. Then, beneath the receipts, she found something even worse. Bank documents. At first they looked like standard loan statements, but as she read closer, her stomach dropped. Marcus had taken out a $250,000 business line of credit. The collateral, their home. Danielle's name was nowhere on the approval documents. He'd forged her signature on one page. She checked it twice. It was subtle, but it wasn't hers. She sank into the chair behind his desk and stared at the floor. Everything they'd built, it was never theirs. It was his game, his stage, and she had been nothing more than a set piece. She heard the front door open hours later, around 10:30 p.m. Marcus whistled casually as he walked in, carrying a takeout bag. She caught the faint scent of floral perfume clinging to his suit, a scent she didn't wear. Danielle was seated at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone. Calm. "Hey, babe," he said, pecking her on the cheek without looking. Meeting ran long. "You know how these investors are. Talk, talk, talk. I brought Chinese." Danielle looked up. Her voice didn't shake. "How was Clarice?" Marcus blinked. "Who? Your investor? Or is she a consultant now?" Her tone was even, but her eyes didn't move from his. He paused, then chuckled nervously. "You jealous or something? There's no Clarice." "You're wild." She tilted her head. "Am I?" He turned to put the food on the counter. "Look, I'm tired. Can we not do this tonight?" Danielle nodded slowly. "Sure, let's not." He poured himself a drink, unaware of the storm quietly forming behind her stillness. Danielle stood, walked upstairs, and locked the bathroom door. She stared at herself in the mirror. The same face that had believed in love, the same woman who gave up dreams, dignity, time. Only now, she saw someone else. Not a wife, not even a woman betrayed, but someone reclaiming a broken truth. And the silence in that mirror was louder than any fight they'd ever had. Danielle started waking up earlier, not to cook Marcus's breakfast or check his calendar, but to create. Her old sketchbooks, dusty and forgotten, were now open on the dining table by 6:30 a.m. With each stroke of her pencil, she felt muscle memory return, the language of form, space, texture. Her fingers moved differently now. There was steel in her wrists, no longer just softness. One morning, she reached out to Elliot Lambert, her old mentor from architecture school. He had always said she was one of the most promising designers he'd worked with. She hesitated over the email for nearly 30 minutes before hitting send. He replied within the hour. Elliot, Danielle, I've been wondering where the hell you disappeared to. There's an opening at Wren & Barrett in Manhattan, senior designer. I'd put my name on your application. You still have the eye. Let's talk. She stared at the message, blinking back tears. For the first time in years, someone saw her beyond Marcus's shadow. When Marcus came downstairs that morning, she was already dressed in jeans and a fitted white blouse, reviewing her old designs on her laptop. He paused. What's all this? Portfolio, she said simply. I'm updating it. He narrowed his eyes, laughed. For what? Pinterest? Or are you trying to play designer again? I was always a designer, she replied. He snorted. You really think anyone's going to hire you now? You've been out of the game too long. You wouldn't last a week in a real firm. She didn't answer. She just kept working. That night, after he fell asleep, she met quietly with a lawyer, Ms. Porter, sharp, direct, unbothered by the layers of deceit Danielle laid bare. The forged signature is enough to start proceedings, Porter said, flipping through the documents Danielle had scanned. He broke state and federal laws. We can petition for injunctions, but we'll have to be quiet about it until the motion is filed. Danielle nodded, steady. I'm not ready to confront him. Not yet. Then don't. We'll protect your interests. You've already started reclaiming your name. Let's finish that. Back at home, Grace began hovering more frequently. She showed up 3 times in 1 week, barging into Danielle's kitchen, rearranging flower vases, criticizing the grocery choices. I noticed you're not baking anymore, Grace said one afternoon, opening cabinets without invitation. Marcus likes things a certain way. I just don't want you to give him a reason to look elsewhere. Danielle didn't reply. She just handed Grace her tea and walked away. Later, Marcus cornered her in the bedroom. You've changed, he said. You've got this attitude. I've remembered who I am, he scoffed. I don't know what Tasha's been telling you, but you better rein it in before this gets ugly. You're not going to compete with me in my own house. It's not your house, she said, eyes steady. Not anymore. He stared at her, lips parting as if to deliver another insult, but something in her expression stopped him. He turned and left without another word. At a family cookout that weekend, the tension exploded. Danielle wore a soft yellow dress, simple makeup, and her hair down. She laughed softly with Tasha near the patio, trying to keep a low profile. Marcus strutted through the yard, showing off a new watch to cousins, while Grace took her place under the shaded pergola, issuing commands like royalty. As Danielle brought over a plate of jollof rice for one of Marcus's nieces, Grace smirked loudly, enough for everyone around to hear. Well, she said, waving her fork, at least she still knows how to serve something. Lord knows design work won't put food on anyone's table. A few chuckles followed, polite but uncomfortable. Danielle stood still. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. But before she could respond, Tasha stepped forward. Grace, with all due respect, she said, voice cutting through the noise. Danielle's been carrying this family's weight for years. If we're handing out gratitude, maybe you should start thanking her for the roof over your son's head. Everyone went quiet. Grace blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, Tasha said, stepping closer. You sit here acting like she's lucky to be in Marcus's life. But Marcus wouldn't even have a life if Danielle hadn't given up hers to build it. So maybe stop throwing stones from a glass throne. The silence that followed was heavy, and this time, it didn't belong to Danielle. She didn't defend herself. She didn't rush in to ease the discomfort. She just sipped her drink and looked Grace in the eye. And for the first time, Grace looked away. Later that night, back home, Danielle stood on the balcony, watching the city lights. She had already sent off her job application. The legal papers were in motion. The photos were saved on 2 different flash drives, one hidden in her jewelry box, the other in a safety deposit box Tasha helped her rent. She had no intention of hay. The room shimmered with success. Crystal chandeliers glistened above rows of champagne flutes. Waiters in black ties weaved through a crowd of tech investors, clients, and socialites. Marcus stood at the center of it all, designer suit, gold watch gleaming, a grin too wide to be sincere. Tonight was his night. DeanTech had just landed a major contract with a government agency, and Marcus was ready to crown himself king. Danielle entered quietly, but her presence turned the heads. She wore a sleek emerald dress, nothing extravagant, just elegant and unmissable. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, her expression calm and unreadable. She moved through the room with a quiet grace, accepting nods and hollow greetings from people who once called her just the wife. Marcus spotted her from across the room and did a double take. He didn't recognize her, not immediately, not this composed, radiant version of the woman he'd dismissed. "Glad you came," he muttered, barely hiding his surprise when she approached. She smiled politely. "Wouldn't miss it." Moments later, a spotlight hit the podium. The DJ lowered the music, and the crowd turned to listen. Marcus stepped up to the mic, holding his champagne. "Thank you all for being here," he began, voice slick with practiced charm. "When I started DeanTech, people thought I was crazy. No investors, no name, just a dream and a busted laptop." Laughter. "But I believed in myself. I worked for this. I earned it." He looked around the room, eyes glinting with pride. Then he added with a smirk, "And of course, thanks to my lovely wife for being my biggest tax write-off." The crowd chuckled awkwardly. Danielle didn't. She moved forward, heels silent against the floor, and reached for the second microphone on the podium. Marcus turned, confused. "Danielle, I'll keep this brief," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Since Marcus likes transparency, let me offer some." People turned. The room began to hush. Danielle continued, locking eyes with the guests. "Marcus didn't build DeanTech alone. He funded it by taking out a loan, using our home as collateral, a home he doesn't fully own, and he forged my signature to do it." Gasps echoed. Marcus's face dropped, pale and caught. "I found the documents months ago. I've since filed for legal protection. Everything has been verified by my attorney." Someone dropped a glass. No one moved. "And since we're being honest," she added, voice unwavering, "he's also been having an affair with a woman named Clarice. The receipts, emails, and hotel logs are all in a safe place." Marcus stepped toward her, panic rising. "Danielle, let's not." She held up her hand. I stayed silent to protect his image, but not anymore. Grace's face went white. A woman near the front audibly whispered, "Clarice, that's the woman he brought to the tech gala last spring." Danielle turned back to Marcus. "You once told me marrying me was your biggest mistake. But here's the truth. This life you're so desperate to protect, I built it. I supported it. I carried you when you were broken. The mistake wasn't marrying you." She leaned in closer, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "The mistake was thinking I needed your permission to leave." The room froze. Marcus tried to speak. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Danielle reached into her bag, pulled out a brown envelope, and calmly placed it on the podium. "Divorce papers. My lawyer's number is included. You'll find the apartment keys on the ring you left in the kitchen." She turned, heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked away. Nobody stopped her, not even Grace. The silence behind her was heavier than applause. The new apartment wasn't large, but it was warm. Sunlight filtered through gauzy white curtains in the living room, painting soft golden squares on the wooden floor. There were moving boxes, still stacked against the wall, a half-built bookshelf, and a thrifted armchair by the window. It was nothing like the marble kitchen and custom furniture she left behind, but it felt more like home than anywhere Danielle had lived in years. She stood barefoot in the kitchen one morning, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, watching the city wake up below. Her laptop pinged behind her. Another email, another client brief. Wren & Barrett had offered her a remote contract until she could relocate fully to New York. And unlike every past position tied to Marcus's network, this one saw her. They didn't care who she used to be married to. They cared about her portfolio, her sketches, her insight. She was 3 weeks in and thriving. Danielle smiled faintly and sat down at her small desk, tucking one leg beneath her. The city hummed outside, a reminder that life kept moving forward, And now, so was she. Tasha became a regular fixture in her new space, often arriving with takeout or bottles of wine and zero judgment. "You've got peace in here," Tasha said once, curling up on the couch. "I didn't realize how loud your old life was." Danielle nodded. "I didn't either, until the noise stopped." Elliot had become more than a professional contact too. Their reconnection started with architectural sketches, design briefs, and calls about form balance and spatial theory. But it gradually softened into long conversations about music, childhood regrets, and starting over in your 30s. He never pushed, never presumed. He just showed up respectfully, patiently, as if he knew she needed to rebuild on her own terms. One evening, after a virtual design meeting ran late, he sent a message. "Take out and a walk next time you're in the city." She hesitated, then typed, "Yes, I'd like that." Meanwhile, Marcus's kingdom began to wobble. Clients withdrew, quietly but swiftly, wanting no connection to potential legal fallout. News of the forged loan and infidelity spread, not because Danielle said a word, but because someone always does. Investors started pulling out. Clarice vanished. And Marcus, once the loudest voice in every room, found himself facing consequences he wasn't used to navigating without a woman cleaning up behind him. He tried calling. Danielle never picked up. Then Grace called. Her tone was softer than usual, cloying, almost desperate. "You made your point," Grace said. "But Marcus is suffering now. His name is in jeopardy. Maybe you can talk to someone. Just help fix things before they fall apart completely." Danielle sat by the window in her apartment, staring at the city skyline, Grace's voice crackling through the speakerphone like static from an old life. When Grace finally stopped speaking, Danielle answered, calm, composed, final. "I sacrificed myself for your son's ego for 7 years, she said. Now he can sacrifice his ego for his own redemption." Grace didn't respond. The line went dead. Danielle closed her phone and turned back to her sketchbook, where a half-drawn atrium waited. It was a design proposal for a women's shelter downtown, her first independent concept. She pressed her pencil to the page and kept going, quiet, free, whole. The late afternoon sun bathed the room in amber light. Danielle sat at her new desk by the window, a clean, white surface with scattered sketches and colour swatches. Beyond the glass, the city stretched into forever, chaotic, alive, and full of second chances. A steaming mug of coffee rested by her elbow. The soft hum of traffic below was the only background noise. Her phone buzzed. A new email, subject line, client request. "Attention, Danielle Forrester." She clicked it open. A boutique hotel group had reviewed her work and wanted to schedule a pitch, with her specifically. Danielle exhaled slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. No Marcus, no Grace, no one speaking on her behalf or over her shoulder, just her. She stood and walked to the small drawer on the side of her desk, opening it gently. Inside was a single photo, her wedding day. In the picture, Marcus had one arm around her, beaming proudly for the camera. But it wasn't his face Danielle focused on. It was her own. Her smile, though genuine back then, was laced with a kind of hopeful naivety she barely recognized now. She stared for a long moment. Then slowly, she tore the photo in half. Not violently, just cleanly. She kept the half where she stood alone, still smiling. She placed it in the drawer again, this time facing up, and closed it softly. Back at her desk, Danielle opened a new design file. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence, drafting the first lines of an open-air shelter project she'd proposed. Minimal, light-filled, a space designed to breathe. No longer anyone's afterthought, no longer shrinking herself to fit into someone else's shadow. "He said it was a mistake to marry me," she murmured, glancing at the skyline. "I say it was my awakening." Her eyes steadied, and then she got back to work. Fade out. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.